wonder because I've oops. Okay.
Welcome everyone to the meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee of Powys County Council. We have apologies today from, I'm just looking to make Councillor Powell, Councillor Breeze, and Ange, Councillor Ange is here because you'd indicated that you might be a wee bit late. So I think the only apologies are Councillor Powell and Councillor Breeze.
So Gareth is in the meeting now, Chair.
Gareth
Ratcliffe.
I think he's here.
He is here, yes, because I had him down originally as an apology, but yes, he is here.
Yeah, so he's no longer apologies, that's fine. And have we on item 2 got any disclosure of interest in connection with this agenda? None?
No.
If in that case, if we'll move to the minutes of, first of all, the 24th of June. We'll take the 24th of June minute. I will turn the pages out asking for any points of clarification, correction, or matters arising as we go through the pages. If you could please raise your hand if there is anything you would like to raise. When I say page numbers, I'll be referring to the pack page numbers. So I'm on page 3 of the pack, which is the first page of the 24th of June minutes. Page 4.
Sorry, then I have my hand up.
Oh, sorry. It's me trying to use 2 screens at once.
Yeah, that's okay. There's no problem. 2 things at the bottom of page 3. First one is the strategic asset review, which I think we need to progress with some urgency. And could we have some clarity on the insurance policy arrangements that are mentioned there, please?
Thank you, John. So we'll take an action to add the strategic asset review to our work plan and to endeavour to have that on one of our agendas within the next month or 6 weeks or so. And Jane, would you be able to give an update on the insurance point?
Jane's muted.
Mute.
Oh, sorry, it's taking me a little while to unmute. In terms of the insurance policy arrangements, the insurance policies are all in place. Was this something specific, John?
Yeah, I was just the bit that has been worrying me somewhat was the arrangements for councillors when working on outside bodies. Some of the outside bodies will have their own insurance arrangements, some won't. It's a real dog's breakfast, and I'm not quite sure how it's being sorted out.
I've asked the insurance lead to review what's in place and to look as to whether the council needs to also make its own arrangements for this. So I haven't got an update I can give you today, but I can follow up and just check where we are with that work and whether anything's been identified. I think the trouble was identifying a policy that the council could take out, but we are looking at it.
Yeah, in these times, I think it's quite important that members are covered properly. They sit on all sorts of all sorts of committees, and the minor charities, any of which could go bust at any time, to be quite honest with you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gareth, you were going to come in.
Yeah, sorry, my wife went down, so I missed the start of this conversation. But from what John just said, it may be worth Jane speaking to Mark at the Brecon Beacons, because I know we've had this issue around Welsh Government appointee members. And they've been doing some work on that, so he may know of someone or a body to go to that be able to assist you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Gareth. So we'll have an update on that. And can we, when can we have an action point that there'll be an update on the insurance point? I'll continue to turn the pages. Page 4 of the 24th of June minute. Linked to our forward work plan, the work plan following the agenda for today is quite short, and some of the items that we noted on this June agenda reference the strategic asset review that John just mentioned aren't on there. So I'll work with Wynne to ensure that our work plan is up to date. Anything further on page 4? 5, page 5, page 6. The assurance mapping on page 5. I think I was just wondering how exact is it, page 5, or am I on the wrong minute? Perhaps I'm on the wrong minute. No, the minutes of the 24th of June assurance mapping. I was wondering if is Ian with us? Ian Halstead? No. I was wondering if what would the way forward be for assurance mapping? Well, I'll take that up with Ian.
Yeah.
Continuing to turn the pages. Page 6, page 7. Jane, could you just remind us, was the risk management framework circulated? Because I can't remember.
I'm not sure. I'd look to Wynne. When did we circulate that to members?
Maybe it could just be recirculated because it didn't.
I can't quite remember, to be honest, whether we did or not. We sent various documents out, but we can easily send it out again. That's not a problem.
Right, okay, I think let's just send that out again because it didn't ring a bell when I read that. Continuing to turn the pages, I'm on page 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and that's the end of the minute. Any comments or questions on the minute from the 24th of June?
No.
Could we have a show of hands to accept the minute, please? Okay. Okay. When is that okay, or does everyone need to show their hand?
No, that's fine. Thanks, Chair.
Right, okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'll move us on to the minute from the 29th of July. Councillor William, did you have something on the minute, or is that a residual hand?
No, that's a residual hand, Chair.
Okay, and Gareth? Gareth Hall? Yeah.
Yes, the rail scheme GCRE. I think I may have to declare an interest because the Welsh Government person who dealt with this, Arthur Emyr, is an ex-colleague of mine.
Mm-hmm.
But I now understand that he's working for the company.
Mm-hmm.
So I just
Thank you.
Line manager at one time.
Thank you very much, Gareth. When can we make a record of that declaration, please?
That's fine, Chair. I'm not convinced that it actually is an interest at the moment in time, but it may be when we're actually discussing it in future.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, it's worth registering anyway. Thanks very much for
Yes.
that, Gareth. 29th of July, page 17 of the pack. 18, 19, 20.
Yeah.
John.
Yes, just about the GCRE, we were promised an informal briefing, a confidential briefing as it has to be, with the CEO. Could we expedite that, please?
Yeah, John, I completely agree, John, thanks. When could we endeavour to try to have that in October? Would you be able to liaise with Nigel Bryn and the Chief Executive to check the Chief Executive's availability to have a private session with us in October?
Yes, certainly, Chair.
Thank you very much, Wyn, much appreciated. Continuing to turn the pages.
Lynn,
sorry,
the other note on page 20 is I've got the reports, but not all the committee will have them. I think the previous confidential reports, have they been circulated?
No.
I think they need to be circulated, certainly, but prior to the meeting we have with the CEO.
Definitely in advance of the meeting with the CEO. Thanks, John. Thanks for pointing that out. Page 20, 21, 22, 23, 4, 5, 6, page 27. On page 27, I just wanted to pause on the working group item and thank everyone for expressing an interest in joining the working groups. I've touched base with Wyn on the size of the working groups and the best membership for each group. So Wyn is still planning to ask for a bit of a skills audit so that we can ensure that we've got the most relevant people on the most relevant working groups. But I was also going to suggest that perhaps none of us is on more than 2, really just from a sort of time management perspective. But I also wanted to open the floor if members have any views on the working group lists on page 27 of the minute.
Could I just say then that time is not a constraint with me, but I do appreciate that we need to really share out this work.
Yeah, thanks, John. Thank you very much. And we've got a live discussion on highways and transport working group. So I think that is one that we'll want to settle and get up and running quite promptly. But if anyone has got any strong views on membership where they have volunteered for more than 2, if you drop myself and Wyn a note. I'll move on unless anyone wants to refer to that, and then work programme. So that's the end of the 29th of July minute. Any further comments or questions in relation to that minute? If not, could I have a show of hands to approve the minute, please? Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. So we will move on to agenda item 4, which is Strategic Risk Register Report, Quarter 1. And Bets Ingram has joined us for this item. So Jane I ask Bets to introduce this report, and then Bets and Jane are happy to take questions and comments from committee members. Bets, do you want to introduce the report? Remember, you're on mute.
Sorry, apologies. Trying to sort it all out. Am I presenting it, Jane, or are you?
Go ahead, Bets.
Okay. Okay, let me just get myself slightly ready. So we have the first quarter strategic report that was taken to Cabinet back on the 26th of July. As always, the report, strategic risk register is key to safeguarding the organisation and building resilience into our services. A risk management approach a risk managed approach to decision making will help us achieve our wellbeing objectives in Stronger, Fairer, Greener, our corporate plan, when it's finally finalised. Going into, without reading the whole report, looking into the, going further into the report, looking at section 3.2, which is the SLT review of strategic risk register. We just wanted to highlight right up at the front that SLT have had a few sessions on the strategic risk register back in July, where they reviewed it all, and where all the current and potential strategic risks as well as global risks were discussed. Key areas of risks to be continually monitored by SLT and Cabinet were identified as health and safety, social services. Social services was covering insufficient capacity to respond to the longer term demand in children and adult services in a timely manner. WCCIS and reliability, the risk of social care provider failure and budgets. Also, other areas that were discussed were the council's budget and increased costs, particularly in relation to the current cost of living situation and economy, recruitment and intention, including demographics, climate and nature emergency, which included biodiversity, compliance with GDPR and DPA, cybersecurity and regulatory stroke inspections. Some of this progressive work is reflected in this report, but further detailed work is taking place, says in the report, over the next few months. We can now say that this work has started because it was due to start taking place in September. Unfortunately, the situation with the budgets has taken a little bit of precedence, so that hasn't progressed as we would have liked it to have at this point in time, but it still is taking place during the autumn months. This includes dedicated SLT sessions on health and safety, recruitment and retention, climate and the nature emergency, budget and increased costs, to consider the risk, their intersectionality and consequences of strategic mitigation required. So it's a detailed session that's going to look at all of the strategic mitigation. Moving on to section 3.3, review of progress to mitigate strategic risks. As at the end of Q1 2022-23, there are 15 risks in the strategic risk register. All of the strategic risk owners have been asked to provide a short summary of progress since last quarter to give assurance that the mitigating actions have been actioned and monitored. Full detail of all these strategic risks, 15, are in attached Appendix A, including the mitigation on how we are controlling them and the progress reviews against them all. Appendix B gives you an opportunity to view the heat map, which presents the results from Q1 in a visual graphical kind of display. It highlights that 1 out of the 15 has a probability of likely and an impact catastrophic, and that 3 have a probability of likely and an impact of major. Now we move on to escalation of risks to the strategic risk register. Housing services would like to escalate unable to provide or enable a development of enough additional homes to fulfill the housing market demand. I paused there, or I struggled with my words because, of course, it's past tense, so Cabinet agreed, and so this has now been escalated onto Strategic Risk Register. The potential consequences are as bulleted in the report: economic dislocation and contract arising from challenges recruiting and retaining staff in the context of not being able to increase the total number of homes in Powys, increased demand for homelessness services, increased number of households registering with homes in Powys for social housing, contraction in locally based construction capability and capacity arising from limited opportunities. So I've briefed those bullet points, but hopefully you can read them all in the report. Current mitigation, again, I'm going to summarise these, make them a little briefer. So we've got focus of development and enabling capacity on directly providing and enabling additional homes, where phosphate management has not resulted in a moratorium on new development. Policy and process changes across the council to encourage and support the repurposing of existing commercial and retail buildings and sites into homes, make productive use of the council's owned land and property assets to enable the development by the council of affordable secure homes, promotion by housing services of package deals to attract direct investment by private developers in new homes, including social housing, development of a range of housing specifications to be able to take advantage of both private and public investment offers, encouragement for all agencies involved in enacting a satisfactory phosphate management regime to complete a workable and practical agreement as soon as possible. Then we move on to the next section and the final section, which is the de-escalation of risks off the Strategic Risk Register. So it was agreed that Heart of Wales Property Services HOUPS being unable to undertake contracted work in a timely and cost-effective manner would be de-escalated off the risk register. That means it is now gone on to the service risk register to be managed. The justification was that HOUPS has now been integrated back into Powys as property services. Repair and maintenance work on Powys buildings and schools are now being carried out by council staff following the successful transfer from Heart of Wales Property Service. All repairs and maintenance on the council's housing stock, corporate buildings and schools will be carried out by staff previously employed by the Heart of Wales Property Services. Outstanding repairs recorded or started by HOUPS before June deadline have been passed to the council to complete. However, there still remains a risk due to the backlog, but one that the service itself can manage instead of it being on the Strategic Risk Register. Also, we have to request to de-escalate a shortage of lorry and bus drivers from Highways Transport and Recycling. This was approved. Again, the justification is the initial shortage of lorry and bus drivers has been managed successfully, and this is now at a level that the service can manage the risk and the supporting risk controls through their own service risk register. Finally, to say the council has transitioned from business critical activity to business as usual and the new normal. As a result, services have incorporated any COVID-19 risks into their own service risk registers to be managed, and the COVID-19 risk register has been closed. This is, however, not to say that the council won't continue monitoring the situation carefully and respond accordingly. The recommendations were to it is recommended that the Cabinet notes that the current Strategic Risk Register it is recommended that Cabinet notes the current Strategic Risk Register and is satisfied with the progress against mitigation actions for Q1, approves the escalation of H0334 to the Strategic Risk Register and the de-escalation of PPP 007 and HGR 0016. Which I've already mentioned in the main report. And this was agreed, and so those actions have been carried out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bets, anything? Well, I think we'll move to questions now. I've got Councillor Gareth, then John B, and then Councillor William. So Councillor Gareth.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, just around the HOUPS and the transfer of risks to the services. how has that been mitigated? Because I'll use one example that I know of with Gwynedd High School, and the fencing, which was in the Estin report, has been a big concern because it's been delayed numerous times, and the risk obviously is there to the school and the return of an Estin report. I'm a bit concerned that it's still not been picked up, and I just want reassurances that services have taken, you know, the ones that have gone back into the services, they're still at the high level that they need to be dealt with, not kind of downplayed when they're handed back to the service. I hope that makes sense. William may want to come on the back of that because he's aware of that as well.
Okay, sorry, I was quickly looking at report to see the control and mitigation. So in the appendix, oh, I can't see on the name of my report, but it's either appendix A or appendix B. There's only currently one action that is action in progress. All the others have been closed or withdrawn, and that is close monitoring by directors, chief exec, and portfolio holders. Further detail we'd have to go to the service to ask, but I would like to just say that this risk is all about well, being unable to undertake contracted work in a timely and cost-effective manner, which was HAUPS. Just because HAUPS has been transitioned into the service, it doesn't mean that we still aren't looking at the risks. It's just that it's been managed in-house on the service's own risk registers. I don't have that detail to hand at the moment, Councillor Gareth, but we can find out for you.
Okay, thank you very much.
I don't know whether Jane wants to add anything.
I think you covered what I was going to say, actually, Beth. So no, nothing to add. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll take an action for that to be pursued for Councillor Gareth in any event. John Brottingham, and then Councillor William, and then Councillor Pete.
Thank you, Chair. I'm on the same HALPS de-escalation. My concern throughout this has been not so much on the housing and building maintenance side, but on the intellectual property side. HALPS had under their jurisdiction what I would call the architect's office, and therefore they were in control of all the design and preliminary consultancy work for our new builds, wherever they were. My concern was that that intellectual property was transferred smoothly and seamlessly to the council on at the transfer in June. There's nothing in this document which says that has happened. I considered it quite a major risk and said so quite forcibly to the monitoring officer on several occasions when we had the opportunity. I've not heard on any progress. Can anybody comment on that, please?
Can I come in, Chair? I think I don't have any detailed information, John. I know it was something that was considered a risk as part of the transition. I know there was being clear about the transfer of documents and data and contractual information as well. All of that was looked at, and I think all of that was resolved. I can ask for an update on this specific item for you to understand if everything has happened as we wished and if everything's in place.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, following the experience we had with the demise of Dornus, I think that would be very wise. And I think we should bear that in mind before we actually de-escalate and, you know, consider it perhaps at the next meeting, because it could be very expensive.
John, thanks very much, Jane, for offering to get an update on that particular point. But it strikes me, looking at our working group list, that we should probably move fairly quickly to identifying precisely what the Governance and Audit Committee Working Group on HAUPS is going to do. And the intellectual property and assurance around some of those things strikes me as something that we could put into the work plan of the working group. So perhaps we can look at the membership of that working group and perhaps have a preliminary think about exactly what we want that to focus on as well.
You're quite right, and yes, of course the committee should look at this, and particularly at the intellectual property side. The other thing that that committee's got to look at, though, and it's quite important, is a lessons learned.
Yes.
One of the critical lessons is, how to actually structure an external company, and this is an abject lesson in how not to do it, to be quite honest with you, the way it was formed, because our directors had absolutely no chance.
Yeah, thank you, John. Thank you very much, John. I'll move to Councillor William. Councillor William, are on mute.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for that. And thanks very much to Bets for giving us such a clear overview of the strategic risks and as perceived for Q1. What I wanted to ask out of some concern is, obviously this appears now to be very much an historic snapshot, and because of the pace of developments which surround us, what reassurance can be offered that our senior leadership team are actually taking account of the developing financial situation, particularly around the threat to the pension fund and the wider budgetary implications of that, in view of the very real threat of large-scale collapse in the wider UK economy. And it seems to be a matter that we can't isolate ourselves from. I'd appreciate just a few words on that point, please.
Thanks very much, Councillor William. I think you've summed up perfectly the question that I think is in many of our minds. So I'll ask Jane to give the committee some assurance on the approach that the senior team is taking to that.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, yes, you get these reports on a quarterly basis. Q2 finishes today, but in terms of what officers do on a daily basis, it's a continual assessment of that change in situation, and a very rapid change in situation. You will have received the report that was considered formally, or you will have ability to see it. I think I updated you in terms of how we were monitoring those risks and price increases, and Cabinet have this week formally considered a paper that outlines the economic situation, the impact it's having on the council, and then what we're doing about that in terms of our budget planning. So I can give you complete assurance that that work has been at the forefront of our minds, and very much has been the focus of the senior leadership team and Cabinet. So we are clearly looking at that. We had an update yesterday from our pension advisors, making sure, obviously they monitor the situation very carefully with our pension fund managers, and action was taken to mitigate the impact of what we were seeing yesterday, and that would be routine in terms of what we do. So we had that assurance from them that they'd done everything that they could in terms of mitigating that impact. So yes, very much something on our mind. I think you have a full members briefing now, week after next, where the whole council will be updated as well, and hopefully that will give you some more assurance that we are really taking that on board and making sure we keep a constant eye on it.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks very much to Jane. That's very helpful at this stage, and I'm sure we'll return to this shortly again. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Councillor William. I'm moving now to Councillor Peat and then to Gareth Hall.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think when I first joined, I may have been on mute, so I just wanted to reiterate my apologies, and thanks for the committee's patience and assistance in getting me in and getting me on my IT failing. So thank you for that. I was looking at the housing risk and the mitigation actions there, and within my ward in Newtown, I've got several long-standing derelict properties that really just are being left to decay and rot, and they're sort of detrimental to the neighbours as well, sort of both visually for the neighbourhood and mentally for the people that live next door to these properties. And indeed, I think one's been derelict since about 2008. So I just wondered, as a mitigating factor, is there any opportunities for, say, the council to compulsory purchase these properties and to turn them into homes?
Jane, would you like to have a go at that one, please?
I can indeed. I know this was a question that was asked in another forum that I've been in recently. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't be able to tell you the answer. But having seen that, yeah, compulsory purchase is not something that we can use to do the things that you were asking for. There has to be a specific purpose and a need, and it's quite regulated in terms of what we are allowed to compulsory purchase as an authority. So that we are not able to do that just to turn properties into housing or whatever. That wouldn't be what we could do. Obviously, we do have council tax premiums applied for empty properties, so we charge an additional level of council tax, and that's partly to try and make people consider the use of those properties and bring them back into housing occupation where possible. But clearly, there are other things the service is looking at. But unless they're council properties, we have very limited ability to do anything with them ourselves.
Okay, thank you, Jane.
Thanks very much for your question, Councillor Pete. Gareth.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to pick up on the Jane's response to Councillor Williams' concerns, which I think is at the forefront of all of, as you said, is at the forefront of all of our minds. And it's good to be assured that this is top of the agenda for the Cabinet and the SLT. But I would like this opportunity for everyone across the council going back to square one when they're looking at their budgets and what they do, is not just see this as a one-off response, but I think it presents the opportunity to create new cultural imperatives in the council when it comes to the robustness of the business planning process. And we're almost, I think, getting to a stage where the council will be asking itself, will it be doing things or won't it be doing things, rather than making incremental changes. So that isn't too far away from zero-based budgeting, which has long been on the agenda of the council. And I know as a committee, we've been keen to get more reinforcement of outputs and outcomes, where a lot of the budgeting process is about looking for money, but money is a means to an end to create these outputs for the residents of the county. So I think when this process is going on, the linkages between the aspirations in the corporate plan and how well grounded they are, almost doing a mid-year review of the business plan and what is entailed in that, I think that process can be embedded in the approach to business planning going forward. And we've got robust business plans where we've got a set of KPIs. We know what the statutory responsibilities of the councils are. We know what the discretionary things that can be pinpointed as well. So I think my message is to Jane and the SLT is this is an opportunity coming out of a very difficult situation to put together these business practices, which I think should be the norm, and adopt them taking forward.
Thank you very much, Gareth. I'm very supportive of everything that you've said. Jane, would you like to have the opportunity to respond?
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. Totally agree with everything you've said in terms of the process and how it must be driven by outcomes and outputs, and understanding what we're getting for the money that we're spending and whether that is the most appropriate means of delivering services. All of those are the basis under which we've asked services to review and update their integrated business plans. There is different degrees of success at this point in terms of where we've got to across each of the services. Some services have now got more information to help with that, understanding the cost of activity and looking at what they have to do rather than what we'd like to do. And I think that's very much come to the fore as part of the way we're going to look at solving this very significant challenge that we have ahead of us. We are not looking at tinkering around the edges, as somebody put it, but this is about whole scale change. And I think when we have the council briefing the week after next, we will be able to take you through some of the things that services are now considering in terms of looking at that service differently. And then very shortly after that, there will be proposals around how we actually do that. So I want to say that, you know, in terms of what you've asked for is exactly what we're looking for as an SLT as well.
Thanks, Jane. Gareth?
Yeah, that's very good to hear, Jane. But as a committee, the assurance, I think we need to have something substantive for our assurance about these processes and how or how not they've been implemented. You said you're asking services. If I was a member of the senior leadership team, I'd be telling them to do this given the circumstances we're operating in. So rather than reports, some visibility on the process and how it's been adhered to, and maybe what issues are cropping up, and maybe how we can add to the process, add value.
Yeah, if I can just respond to that, the IBP process is defined. More, you know, committee could look at the documentation that we ask for, the toolkit that accompanies it in terms of asking services or the requirements, what they need to do to fulfill those obligations. What then happens is there is panels of challenge run by the SLT and Cabinet together. I can see Councillor David is going to come in to add to that in a moment. Those challenge events have been delayed a little because we felt that the output we were seeing wasn't what was needed to respond to the situation that we're in. So we've gone back to heads of service and set out a much more rigorous approach for them to come back with by the 21st of October. And then the following week, there will be a whole week where we will review and challenge the output of that work. So I think it's a matter of time by when the wider council will see some of that, but that is the process and the timescales within which we're looking to complete that.
Oh, that's the rigor I was looking for, Jane.
Thanks, Jane. I'll bring in Councillor David.
Thank you, Chair. If you bear with me, if I do fumble a little bit, but I'm still in the middle of a COVID attack. So I just wanted to add a few comments to some of the points that have been raised, but I think Jane covered what I was going to say very, very well with regard to Councillor Gareth's point and the challenges that are put to heads of service. We've already started the process, as Jane said. We've looked at the IBPs in some detail. We haven't finished with them. It's not a case of telling them what they can do, but it's not far from that. But I don't think, unfortunately, that services will be getting everything that they've requested through their IBPs going forward. And I think, referring to the financial updates that Jane touched on with regard to the question from Councillor William, that is a high-level document that really outlines all the financial challenges that you're all aware of, but it just reiterates them basically and goes into some detail on it. The financial challenges that we faced with as far as the setting of this budget is concerned, and the impact that that's going to have. And it's going to be a very, very difficult process, to say the least. That's also gone to Finance Panel. There was a press release this week at a high level, so the public are aware of certainly some of the challenges that are facing us. We're going back to Finance Panel. I think it's next week with more detail, and that'll culminate with a briefing for members in the following week, which will put a lot more detail around what you see in the financial update. But there's a long way to go yet, but we're working very, very hard on it, and the challenges are going in right, left and centre, to say the least. On the point about long-term derelict properties, My understanding that that's something Welsh Government are looking at, because there are major concerns around that. And Jane did touch on, as far as we're concerned, the council tax premium, that's currently set at 50%. That's going up in April as a result of a decision taken by full council, I believe, to 75%. But as far as Welsh Government's concerned, obviously there is an option. We could increase that to 300%, but that's not the situation at the moment. It's going to go up to 75% in April. So I just wanted to add those points, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor David, much appreciated. Jane, I was just wondering, or perhaps this is a question also for Councillor David, would it be possible picking up Gareth's assurance point, underlying a point that this is an assurance committee, that could we have a short presentation, you know, a PowerPoint pack or something like that, that set out the process and some of the issues, you know, the upside, the downside, the issues, the risks, what you're encountering as you conduct the process. It doesn't have to be very long, but, you know, I'm thinking a PowerPoint rather than a paper, you know, just to talk us through the end-to-end process, and perhaps in that end-to-end process examination, where are the kind of the difficult points in the process and things like that. It might be helpful if we could have a presentation like that.
Yeah, of course. And I can show you then exactly in terms of the IBP process and the requirements within that at a service level as well. We can share that with you. Yes, of course.
Thank you very much. We'll put that on the agenda for a meeting quite soon, please.
Can I just say, Chair, I think that's a very valid request. It's something that when I was sitting on the audit committee as a member, that I did request some time back to get closer to the IBP process. So yes, I think that would be beneficial for you.
Thank you very much, Councillor David. Thanks. Anything else on any other questions or comments on the risk, the strategic risk assessment that Bets has very helpfully walked us through? I think from me, I'd like to start we talked previously about having some deep dives into particular risks, and I'd quite like to get scheduling that perhaps on a quarterly basis. And as a starter for 10, I'd quite like to start with the social care provider risk, if that had the committee's support, for a deep dive where we could invite the relevant head of service and have a deeper discussion on the nature of the risks. And what I'm really interested in that risk in particular is what controls and actions are really in the gift of the council, and what there is in the external environment that quite frankly it's very, very difficult for the council to influence. And so to see the golden thread between the risk, its impact, and the actions and controls that are in place. So as a starter for 10, I would like to suggest a social care provider failure, but then to build a programme of risk deep dives for the committee. I'll pause there because I can see that John wants to come in. John, you're in mute.
Can you hear me now?
Mm-hmm.
There's a banner gone across the microphone, so I can't see what it says. Yes, I agree basically with virtually everything you say. I'm jumping ahead just a fraction because I think one of the problems we had with our previous committee was the relationship with the cabinet. And I do think your idea is very good for these deep dives, but I would like to see the cabinet member there, responsible portfolio holder there, as well as the head of service. I think that would be very useful, both for information and understanding purposes, but also building relationships.
I think that's an excellent suggestion. Thanks very much, John. Any comments? Any further comments on risk? Well, before we move on, I think I just will thank Bets again for attending and for her walkthrough and for her work in this space and her supporting the committee's assurance role. So thanks very much, Bets, and thanks to Jane as well.
Thank you very much.
You're free to go now, Bets, you don't have to stay. And we members will have noticed as we move on to agenda item 5, corporate fraud, that that we don't have a paper. So I'm going to ask Jane just to give us a very brief explanation, which I hope you'll all appreciate, as to the reason why we don't have a paper. Jane.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the lead, David Morris, I know has been to committee previously. David is also leading on the schemes, the cost of living schemes. He delivered all of the COVID grants to businesses and so on over the pandemic. Unfortunately, the timing of quarter reporting this quarter has coincided with us having to get a new scheme up in place for this week to meet the Welsh Government guidelines, and he has had to focus on that scheme, which I'm sure you'll appreciate is a priority for us to make sure that we can get that help out to our residents. So unfortunately, that has delayed him preparing the report, but here he has promised that now that that piece of work is completed and the application process can start, he can then look and turn to delivering that report for you. I will just say, though, it is only a matter about the report. The fraud work and the fraud team and the work that they do continues as you would expect, and that of course is an integral part of that whole application process as well, for some of these schemes. So the work is ongoing. It's just a matter of not being able to prepare a report for you for this particular meeting.
Thanks very much, Jane. And our plan is to have the report in October.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So thanks very much for that explanation, Jane. And we, do appreciate that colleagues are under tremendous pressure at the moment. So it's understandable, if a bit regrettable, but we are where we are. If there are no comments or questions on that for Jane, I will move us on to agenda item 6, which is a draft action plan responding to the committee's self-assessment. The self-assessment exercise was conducted probably almost a year ago, Jane, John?
It was back March time, I think the assessment was done.
Yeah. John, you're on mute.
Sorry, yeah, I was just trying to think when it was. Yes, it wasn't a year ago. I think it was this calendar year.
This calendar year, but early in the calendar year.
Yeah.
And all committees are expected, required indeed, to undertake a self-assessment and develop an action plan accordingly. So this is the first time that this has been introduced, and I guess perhaps we are not as far ahead as we might otherwise have been, but I think we need to recognise that there has been a change of administration and reconstitution of the committee, so that all takes time. Colleagues will have seen the original self-assessment report, and this is a draft action plan in response to the items identified there. Jane and Wynne have worked together to put the draft action plan together. It's not a finished article, and from my perspective as chair, I think it's quite important that it's not a finished article, because it's really important that each and every member of the committee has the opportunity to consider the draft action plan and to influence the draft action plan, because ultimately as committee members we will own the action plan. It will inform how we conduct business and how we relate to other parts of the authority going forward. And we are expected to go through this process on an annual basis two from now on, I understand. So with that introduction, I'll ask Jane to elaborate a bit further, to draw our attention to some particular parts of the action plan, and then I'll invite questions and comments from members. Jane.
Thank you, Chair. I think you've covered most of what's in the recovering report, so I'm not going to go back over that. The plan, as you can see, is set around the 4 themes that we identified, and I think I gave you a verbal update back in July. And then there were specific areas of focus as well, with some bullet points there in the report. So it's quite a detailed plan in terms of there's 53 actions on this plan. And they've all been assigned to responsible officers. You can see alongside each action some of the work that's already been undertaken, but then what we're suggesting is the further action that needs to be taken alongside it. And then there is a RAG status for each of those action points in terms of whether they're on track for delivery. We use the red, amber, green things for that. At the moment, and as you would expect at the start of a plan, most is green because we're defining the timescales within which to work. There are a couple highlighted as amber, and I think we've touched on both of those this morning. The one was around the GCRE and asking for the Chief Exec to come and speak to us. So that's amber because I think we've been asking for that for a little while, and also to complete the risk the skills audit across members. So we are being a little delayed on that. So that's flagged up as an amber as well. There are some gaps, as you can see on the report. I think it's about getting members to actually participate now and look to see whether they feel that the actions are appropriate, as you've said. And that's really what today can start to focus on, and we can amend the plan then, and you'll routinely get it back to the committee to monitor the delivery of those actions. So that's the brief overview. You'll see there are some areas highlighted. Again, I think the very first point or point 1.2 on the action plan asks how the new committee wants to involve the public in future meetings. So I thought it was important for you to have a say in terms of part of that. So I've highlighted that and flagged that. And there's no status defined to that as yet because it's not defined. But really, it is for the committee to come back with anything they feel is appropriate in terms of improving the plan itself.
Thanks very much, Jane. Wynne, is there anything you want to add, or anything that you can, is our action, this might sound a bit funny, but is our action plan the same kind of approach as other committees' action plans? You know, is ours as good as everyone else's?
It'll vary from committee to committee, Chair, depending on what comes out of the various self-assessments. As you say, this is part of the new process following the 21 Act that we need to go through, and is part of then developing the corporate review of effectiveness and how we're operating, and this is a very vital part of it. So nothing further to add, really, Chair.
Thanks very much, Wynne. I'll open the floor then for questions and any detailed comments or suggestions for inclusion in the action plan. Councillor Gareth.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, really pleased to see this, and it's really encouraging. Obviously, I'm new to the committee, so basically going to some of the older ones who've been on the committee and how they feel this reflects, because obviously this was pre-election, and does it reflect what we're looking to achieve now going forward with the slight changes, committee membership and everything else like that. So it's more of a question to ourselves than officers, and that's basically it, really. So, Chair, over to you.
Thanks very much. Well, I'm new too, Councillor Gareth. So I'll bring in Councillor David, and I may also ask John Brottingham to comment on that as a committee member of some long standing. Councillor David.
Just briefly, Chair, on point 3.3, 3.4, effective relationships need to be developed with the Cabinet. Yes, Councillor John was quite right. What appeared to have happened during the previous administration, but I just wanted to add, because I didn't have the opportunity to come in really, when he made the point about portfolio holders accompanying heads of service when we do deep dives into different service areas. I'm sure the leader and the cabinet would be more than happy to oblige, the committee with the presence of the portfolio holders at such a session. So I just wanted to make that point, Chair.
Thank you very much. It's really helpful to have that clarification and that sense of collaborative working, because I think that's what we're all aspiring to. Thanks very much, Councillor David. John, can you share a wee bit of your
Yeah,
experience?
I think the actual workings of the committee improved markedly over the years when I was attending, not because I was there, but organically they had improved, and particularly some of the work from the working groups. That was a big step forward. The major problem, and I keep on returning to this, and I'm glad David reinforced it, is, when we wrote the reports, they went to the cabinet and they were at best noted. We need to have a much more dynamic relationship with the cabinet, so that we can throw ideas to and fro. And I think that's very important. And it's very important also for the finance panel as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks very much. So it's about visibility and traction and a dialogue.
Yeah.
Thanks, John. Thank you very much. Any other comments on that matter or any other aspect of the draft action plan? Or does it broadly do what we want it to do? I think, Jane, you might have nailed it. I think just from me, Jane, it's the regular reporting. So we probably need to see this once a quarter at least.
Yeah.
And the whole methodology will mature as, I'll bring you in, Gareth, the whole methodology will mature as we do another cycle of assessment and action plan revisions. But it would be really helpful to think about how we track the actions, and if we land up with the same things when in year 2, to examine what we didn't quite respond to, so that there's some sense of movement and learning as we go through. So if we could think about how we track them on a yearly basis, but also look at the themes going through. And I'm assuming as well that whilst, as Wynne said, every committee is different and the issues arising for each committee will differ, I would be very surprised if there weren't common themes emerging over the next couple of years across the whole council, because that's very typical of this self-assessment type of methodology in any complex organisation. But Gareth, you were wanting to come in.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I was just looking at the one about the committee and engaging with the public. It's something we need to get our heads around. And I was going to ask, is there any good practice of the council that we can utilise from elsewhere in the council, where they have got vehicles or events or whatever to get this meaningful and constructive engagement? And is there any best practice from elsewhere around Wales that we could tap into? Because
good questions. When colleagues from the council, any comments, suggestions on this matter?
There's a couple of different ways, I suppose, you could do things, Chair. One we've used with one of the scrutiny committees was to talk to the communications team and to our, I'm trying to think what what their titles are nowadays, but certainly on one piece of work we did for the Economy Scrutiny Committee, we asked them to develop a questionnaire for us, which then went out to various bodies, was made available to the public, etc., just to try and get feelings back from the public, for example, in terms of pieces of work you're actually working on, to see whether somebody, you know, has got any sort of generic viewpoints to try and capture that sort of feeling. So that's one avenue. I know we've put out comment on the website, the ability for members of the public to either raise a topic for consideration by the scrutiny committees, or actually to come along and provide evidence to one of the scrutiny committees. Nobody's taken us up on that so far, and it's something fairly new we put out at the end of last year following the audit report on scrutiny. But we could certainly expand that into governance and audit if that was, you know, the committee's wish. So those are a couple of potential ways of doing things. And you may be that you're looking at targeted approaches in terms of specific pieces of work, because you're looking at assurance. It's not exactly like a scrutiny committee in the role that it's undertaking. So I think it's the way of actually deciding what you want, what sort of comments you're looking for back. Of course, the other big resource you've actually got in the council are members themselves, in terms of being able to, you know, talk to their localities and get comments back from the public that they serve.
Thanks, Wynne. I mean, I personally think this is quite tricky territory for an audit and governance committee, but just because it's tricky territory for an audit and governance committee doesn't mean that we shouldn't try. We should try, but it is perhaps a less seductive topic than some other topics that members of the public will encounter. Councillor William.
Thank you, Chair, and I agree very much with the approach that Wynne was suggesting there. I had one other suggestion, just to test past colleagues. It may be inappropriate, but I wondered whether it would be sensible and permissible for us to have an informal focused meeting with the designated local democracy reporter, just to have an informal exchange. He has in previous times taken a thoughtful approach to our business, and because that function sort of cuts across all the main print media in our part of the world, not just any one newspaper, and because of the nature of the role, I think that might have some merit, but it may be unconstitutional or inappropriate. But I'd appreciate colleagues' thoughts on that one.
Excellent idea.
Thanks very much, Councillor William. What would be would that be possible?
Don't see why you can't ask individuals to come along and actually engage their views. I think we'd have to just judge the way of how we are doing it. Do we do it like a public forum? Because again, the thing with webinars, you can have question and answer type sessions with the public if the public wanted to come along and actually put things forward to you. Okay, you need to regulate it, and I think we need to look at how we actually deliver this, because I don't think we've done this in the past. Or as you say, you could have a closed session, invite people, anybody who wants to come along, put the link out and say, this is it, and then try and engage people's views that way around, which could include the local press. You know whether Jane's got any additional comments on that?
Not really. I'm sort of thinking on my feet here. So I'm not thinking anything different, but I think we can ask others and see what they do and where it's working better and what's more effective to engage the public.
Thanks, Jane. Councillor David. On mute, Councillor David.
Sorry, just to highlight the fact that we've just commenced a public consultation around public participation strategy. which was a requirement of the Local Government and Elections Act 2021, which required all local authorities to prepare a public participation strategy. I had a quick look at the document yesterday, and it's quite comprehensive, and it does cover a lot of the areas we've discussed today. And I'm just looking for the link. I think you can find the strategy and the documents there. It's on HTTPS, obviously, www.haveyousaypowys.wales public participation strategy. Certainly worth having a look at that, because there's some very, very, very good ideas in it. So I just thought I'd highlight that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jane, can you remind me about the local authorities' statutory accounts? There is a opportunity for the public to scrutinise them and to to scrutinise them and to come in and actually ask questions, isn't there?
There is.
Yeah.
And we have to advertise that annually, and get a day that our auditors are available as well for questions. We don't get a lot of requests, I have to say. I only recall one in the time that I've been in my role. So, but yes, there is that opportunity.
Yeah, I was just, again, I'm kind of feeling my way to this, but obviously that's part of the statutory process anyway, but Governance and Audit Committee also has a role in assurance around accounts and audit and the ISA 260 and stuff like that. So I'm just, is there anything, it's an open question, is there anything there in that process that Governance and Audit Committee could contribute to in terms of public engagement? But as you say, if nobody actually asks to see them anyway, well, it's probably not an opportunity. Yeah, let's continue to explore this, because I think it is important. As you can probably gather, I quite like and I'm quite passionate about governance and audit matters, but not everyone is, and it's quite hard sometimes to get people into this space, but it would be great if we could. It'd be great if we could. Any further suggestions or comments on the emerging action plan? No. Well, if not, I think Jane, if you and I continue to keep this as a live document and bring it back to the committee once a quarter, but by the time we get to the turn of the year, we'll be in the next assessment cycle anyway, so it will be a sort of journey of continuous improvement, both as a committee and in our ability to assess ourselves and develop action plans, I suspect. The final item is item 7, which is the work programme, which I mentioned in passing already when we were looking at the minutes, and have already identified a couple of items: GCRE, strategic asset review, and some other matters that we need to have added into the work programme, as well as the deep dives, regular reviews of the action plan for self-assessment, and a presentation on the integrated business planning process. So I think there's quite a few items have emerged through this discussion that are already on the work programme but aren't on this particular piece of paper, and some items that we need to get factored in on a regular basis. And I'll work with Wynne and Jane to get that going. I would like I think we need to get the working groups up and running within the next few weeks. So we'll try to bear down on the precise memberships quite quickly with the benefit of the skills audit, hopefully, and get those working groups motoring. And then we will also need agenda slots for the working groups to just very, very briefly share with the committee what they're doing and any issues that they're encountering. So there's quite a lot of work to do on work planning, but I'll pause there and invite others to make any comments or suggestions on the work programme. Okay, no further comments. So I'm trusting also that silence is kind of implicit agreement with what I just said about me getting on with getting a better schedule with Wynne and Jane. Okay, thank you. Councillor Pete.
Sorry, Chair.
All right, thank you, Chair. Sorry, Wynne. And it was only just a quick small point, actually. The meeting on the 24th of November is on the schedule at 10:30. I think I've got 10 in my diary. I just wanted to double check.
I'll double check that, Councillor Pete.
Thanks, Wynne.
See what I've
Sorry,
got
it's only a
down
little
there.
point.
That may or may not happen now, because what I was going to comment on is obviously we've got the meeting on the 24th, which would be a seminar for yourselves on the closure of the accounts. 27th will be the actual meeting. We know that that's going to be delayed now, so we may use that 27th meeting as is already in the diary for other things, and we'll have to look for another date in November for the closing of accounts.
But Councillor Pete was talking about the 24th of November meeting that's already in.
Yeah.
Oh, beg your pardon. Yes,
Yeah.
the 24th of November would be 10:30, but I'll double check that as well. What we tend to do at the moment is we have pre-meetings with chair and vice chair 9 to 10. We then have potential training of the members of yourselves as a committee between 10 and 10:30, and then we have the main meeting at 10:30. But if I've made a mess of the actual time scale, I'll go back and check it.
So I've got 10 in my diary too, and we were going to probably be having the pension accounts that day as well.
Yeah, right. I'll go back and double check that.
Yeah. Okay.
Chair,
Thanks, Wynne.
Thanks, Jane.
that may be the date that we have the full accounts as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I'm guessing a 10 o'clock start would probably be better.
Yeah. So I've currently got it 10, 12:30. So if that is the day we pick to do the full statutory accounts, we will need plenty of time then, won't we?
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks very much. Any other comments or points that members wish to make? Otherwise, I will move to close the meeting. Okay. Well, thank you very much to everyone who has contributed to the success of the meeting. And before we go, I am obliged to remember that we have to do a bit of reflection just before we close on what went well and what could